We are recording the interview of Robert Gualtieri. This interview is being conducted by David Morse from the Wright State University Veteran Voices Project. This interview is being recorded at the Crown Plaza in Dayton, Ohio. It is 3:21 p.m. on July 10th, 2019. All right, Robert. You go by Robert or Rob?
Bob.
Rob? All right.
Bob.
Oh, Bob. Bob, that's right. Bob. Let's start off with where and when you were born.
1948, October 5th, in Jersey City, New Jersey.
And who are your parents, Bob?
Umberto Gualtieri, and my mother was Helen Gualtieri, di Mortito.
Okay. And Gualtieri, what, like?
Italian. Southern. Gualtieri is in Calabria. My father grew up in a town kind of right in the middle of the toe of Italy, if that explains.
Yeah. Okay. Very cool. So, are you first generation, or is your father first generation American?
My father's naturalized. He came over from Italy.
Okay.
My mother was born in the United States.
Okay.
Her parents came over from Italy.
I see. Okay.
So I'm second generation, or depending on second generation from my mother and first from my father.
Right. Yes. I gotcha. So that's pretty cool. That's awesome. And do you have any siblings?
No, my father died when I was 1 year old, 1949. So my mother never wanted to remarry. So I'm just the only kid.
Wow, just you and your mom. Huh?
Well, and my aunt and my grandmother. A typical family type thing. They all rally around. I always laugh. Say it took three ladies to raise one little boy.
That's great. All right. So now, prior to this, prior to your father's passing, was he or any aunts, uncles in the military?
No, I have no relatives that I know of in the military, although somewhere in my mother's line, back in Italy, somebody fought with Garibaldi in that. But I only have, in my family, just one cousin. He was a naval helicopter pilot. Other than that, it was just him and I. So I have nobody else in the military.
Gotcha. What did you do before joining the service?
College, I went right in. I was Air Force ROTC, and went right into the Air Force when I graduated to flight school.
What made you decide to go ROTC?
Well, I had never even a concept of joining the military, but in the orientation, freshman year orientation, when they brought us to the building where housed all the college activities, an Air Force ROTC guy jumped me, the cadet, and suggested that I sign up, and told me that the first 2 years is optional. You don't sign any contracts to your junior year, so if you don't like it, you can always get out. And I said, if I went into the Air Force, I wouldn't have to worry about finding a job when I graduated college. I'd go in the Air Force for 4 years, get work experience, and then I'd be more hireable out in the civilian world. So, but then when I was in ROTC, I liked it. And I decided I might make it a career. So that's when I switched over, because I was a chemistry major. I switched over to become a pilot, and that's why I wound up going to flight school.
Wow, that's some serious thinking. How old were you at this point?
When I graduated?
Yeah, well, when you decided to make the decision, you're like,
Oh, well, it would have been almost 18.
Yeah. Wow.
17, not quite 18. I was born in October, so I was always one of the younger people in the class.
Really? Wow. That's some really like forward thinking for an 18-year-old. That's really good.
Well, you know, everybody's worries about getting a job. You know,
Yeah.
you talk to people, and in the course of working summer jobs and stuff, you listen to some of the younger people, and you know, that's what you kind of like worry about. I assume maybe people today don't worry about finding a job when they graduate college, until they want to pay off their college debts.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then they worry about it.
It's a lifetime of college debt too. All right. So you went ROTC. I have to ask this: who gave you your first salute at your commission ceremony?
I don't remember his name, but one of the tech sergeants, one of the ROTC cadre. I mean, it's all predetermined. Like you know which one of them you're going to salute, because
Okay.
there's only a couple of enlisted guys, and you know about the tradition, so
Yeah.
you're just expecting it. So then we had coin dollars, not paper money. So gave the salute and gave him the coin.
And that felt good.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah. All right. So get through college, and what did you receive your degree in?
Chemistry. BS in chemistry.
Okay.
Then later on, I got a master's in systems management from USC, but that was later on while I was in the Air Force.
Okay. So you got accepted into the pilot program. Where then did you go from there?
Pilot training was in Del Rio, Texas, which, growing up in New Jersey, right across the Hudson River from New York City, going down to Texas was an adventure. And I'm Italian, and well, up in Jersey there's a lot of Italians, so I can't say that I experienced any kind of discrimination. My mother probably did when she was younger, but I didn't know it. And being a northerner, you could probably detect some accent now, but when I graduated college, my accent, my New York accent, you needed an axe to cut it. And I was going to go through the solid South down to Texas, you know, which was like, oof.
Yeah.
So I went through Oklahoma. I stopped in Oklahoma overnight, and I went into a restaurant, sat at the counter, and a cute little dark-haired waitress at the counter. I ordered a cup of coffee, and she said, "You must be a WAP." I said, "Oh, I'm experiencing discrimination." And she said, "Well, I'm a WAP too. We have a whole WAP community out here." I said, "Oh well, that's the way there it was." But I went down to Texas, and that was a quite a different experience. The only way I could put it is, the first time I was in a parking lot, and I got out of my car, and I passed somebody that I didn't know, and he said hello with a big smile on his face.
Right.
Up in New York, you don't talk to people that you don't know.
Yeah, that is a bit of a different culture there. It's great.
But I liked it. I got to like Texas. I was surprised.
And how long were you stationed there? For your
Del
training?
Rio was 53 weeks. After we finished flight school, then I had to go to water survival school at Homestead Air Force Base. Then I went to, my assignment was going to be C-7 Caribous to Cameron Bay. So I went through Caribou School in Abilene, Texas, and then the last day of that, they canceled that assignment because they were going to give all the C-7s to the Vietnamese, and I was just coming out of flight school, so I wasn't really needed. And there were 7 of us, so a new block of assignments came down, and that's where I was able to select a C-130 to Taiwan, because I was dying to go overseas. So then I went to C-130 school at Little Rock. That was 10 weeks. And then, what do you call it? Basic survival up at Fairchild, that's in Washington, Fairchild Air Force Base in Washington State. And then on the way to Taiwan through jungle survival. We used to call it snake school.
Yeah.
That was a 3-day course. And then I finally got to Taiwan.
Wow. Now, when you were in training, flight school training, how did it feel flying for the first time? Did you feel pretty natural on it, or?
Well, I only had a few hours of flying before that, because if you were in the pilot program in ROTC, when you're a senior, you can get some flying hours. But it actually took me a while to really get the right feel about flying. Once I did, like, it was totally different. I guess in the beginning it was more mechanical. You think, I got to do this and I got to do that. Once you felt like you and the airplane were kind of one, then everything changed. You know, the clue bird hits you, and there you go.
All right. So, get behind. So you originally were flying. You said you went to training for
The C-7?
C-7, yeah. And the C-7, so you started flying the C-7, and then you switched to the C-130.
I just went to the C-7 school.
Oh, okay.
The C-7 is a piston-driven engine,
Yeah.
which the Air Force doesn't have anymore. But so that was quite different. Then when I got to the C-130s, that's a turboprop.
Right. Okay. So, and you actually didn't fly any of the C-7s?
Not operationally.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. So you're flying. You said Rock Island is where you went to for
Little Rock.
Little Rock. Thank you. Little Rock is where you went to for the C-130 flight training. How was that training?
It was fine. I mean, like, it was a good experience. It was totally different than learning to fly the Caribou, because it was longer, and the C-130 is more complicated. So you got to you start with classes. It's because you got to learn the systems and, you know, how to fly how to fly the airplane, and you do some simulators, and then you get out and you just go fly with your crew. Pretty much, I guess I flew with basically the same crew out through training. Well, at least the first half is qualification training. You learn how to fly the airplane, take off, land, you know, and fly instruments and all that kind of stuff. Then the next 5 weeks was tactical training, where you learn to do airdrops.
That's
And low-level flying.
low-level flying. Yeah. Okay. All right. All right. And then you got orders to CCK at that point. How in the midst of all this, how did your mom and the rest of your family feel about you being in the military and military lifestyle?
My mother was totally flabbergasted when I came back and said I was joining ROTC. She just she didn't think that I was too rebellious or whatever, you know, one of those. And my father had a doctorate in social studies, and he was a union man. He started a union local in the bakery and confectionery workers in New York City. So my mother wanted me to get a college degree, master's, and a doctorate, and get right into it. But when I finished college, I had to go work. I was tired of school already. But it's like any mother, when you accomplish something, she was proud. And, I mean, she didn't give me flack or anything.
Right. That's good. So you get orders. when exactly, what time frame was this that you got orders and then went to CCK?
I entered the Air Force in September of 70, finished flight school in September of 71. I didn't get to CCK because of all those TDYs en route until early May of 1972.
72. Okay.
That's when I actually hit the property or the base at CCK.
Okay. All right. And what was your first impressions of CCK?
I was totally amazed. I was a little disappointed because in 1972, around Easter, the North Vietnamese started an offensive, and I missed it. I got there kind of like during the mop-up. It was still some fighting stuff going on, but not much. I missed all the real serious stuff where they were shooting up the airplanes and stuff. But it was, you might imagine, I don't know, you come from the United States, you go to an Asian country, and everything is different. The club was different. You go in and they had one-armed bandits and everybody's happy. During happy hour, the drinks were a nickel. Unless you got an expensive drink, those are a dime. And it was kind of a party atmosphere at CCK. But as I look back, it's kind of like the Vietnam mentality, because when they're home stationed, CCK was a happy place. Taiwan, everybody liked Taiwan. Then you go and you fly in country, do all the serious stuff, and you come back out and you enjoy yourself. I didn't know that at the time. I was just amazed at everything that was going on. And I looked out on the ramp, big ramp, and I know at Little Rock they had lots of airplanes on the ramp, and I only saw like 3 C-130s. And I know there were 4 squadrons, and each squadron is assigned 16 airplanes. I asked somebody where all the airplanes are. They said, oh, in battle damage repair. Or in country, because of all the big push going on. A lot of the airplanes got shot up. They were doing airdrops over Anlock, and I missed all that. And I was at the young age of being sad that I missed all that serious stuff. And then you talk to people, and they kind of gave me the idea, you should get, when you first get here, take some time to see the sights, go see Taiwan, get to know what's going on. So I tried to do that, but you want to fly as soon as possible, because that's what you're really there for. So you go to the squadron and you lobby with the schedulers to get on the schedule and get checked out, because you got to get checked out locally before you can go in country. And but it was totally amazing. Everything was different than anything I ever saw.
That's really cool. Now, your first mission there at CCK, what did that end up being?
Well, the first couple of missions were just local area training. You get up, and they every time you go to a new base, you have to get locally checked out. So they take you up and they fly you around. You get a check ride to make sure that you know how to fly the airplane. So that was the first, and then I had to get in by the end of May in order to start my combat pay. Otherwise, I would have lost a month of combat pay. So the schedulers, my first rotation in country was just like an extra co-pilot. That when I got to Tan Son Nhut, that's where we were staying. That's where we flew out of. They scheduled me to fly to observe with just different crews that were flying around. So my first couple of weeks in Vietnam were just watching, and then they put me on a crew, and I was ready. My next shuttle was my actual first mission as a co-pilot, as a aircrew co-pilot, And the funny thing, one of the other people you just interviewed, Rick Lentz, he was my the first navigator that I flew with. And so what they would do is everybody would, the officers would meet in one everybody that was rotating in country, you'd meet in one parking lot and the enlisted would be in another parking lot, and buses would go around, pick everybody up. So I was totally amazed. I go to get, picked up, and people got papasan chairs that they're taking in country, golf clubs, tennis rackets. I said, this is a war zone. We're going to a war zone, and people look like they're going on a vacation. And so my navigator, and he had, I don't know if he had tennis rackets or golf clubs, what he intended. And so I thought that was kind of funny, but this was his first mission after he just got shot up. His first mission after getting out of the hospital. So what it was on the base, when you stayed on Tonsanuk, there were, like any base, activities to do, and then you go fly in country. So it was kind of like a little deceptive. It was like typical the way GIs are, You go fight the war, and then when you're not fighting the war, you go enjoy yourself. Then you go back fighting the war. But yeah, flying in country was like, again, it was an experience. Fly C-130s or any Air Force airplane have checklists. And the co-pilot reads the checklist, and then the other crew positions will respond. And the after takeoff checklist, I knew because I was went through the schools and everything. But the first co-pilot, when I was observing, this was before I became a crew member, he read the checklist so fast. I don't think he was reading it. He probably was doing from memory, which I can still do now. and I haven't flown in many years, but that checklist I've read so many times, the after takeoff checklist, I couldn't understand what he was saying. And all the crew positions were just answering him, but he paused at a certain time and somebody else, and I couldn't even understand his words. And then the co-pilot would call up, and you'd call the radar sites and check for what they would say, fire and following, which meant asking if there was any artillery going off in your path, and asked these were World War II type radars, so they weren't really that good, but to just kind of like follow you, because all the flying was visual flight rules. We didn't fly instrument procedures, so everything you just kind of like flew where you were going, and then called up tower and made a landing and stuff. So the first shuttle was, or the first rotation was rather interesting, and the crews they were good. The crew members, I guess they're used to new people coming, and they don't really give you a hard time unless you act geeky or dorky or something like that, or think we are. But yeah, so then after that, just kept going back and getting more experience.
That's pretty cool. Now, how many hours did you end up putting in flying there? At
7. Oh, at CCK? A lot. I flew as much as I could. I flew enough to upgrade to aircraft commander within 12 months. And I was next in line to get upgraded, because they would upgrade you locally. They wouldn't send you back to the States to upgrade to aircraft commander. And then the unit moved to the Philippines. So I lost my. Then by the time we got to the Philippines, there were people waiting. So it took me a while to get upgraded, but I probably logged 1,400 hours by the time just at CCK.
That's a lot of flying hours. Now, did you pretty much have the same crew each time you went up?
Well, they tried to do that, but it didn't quite work, although probably just before I upgraded, I had flown with the same crew for a number of rotations. So when I became an aircraft commander, I had a new obviously a different co-pilot, but I still had the same flight engineer, and I believe the same navigator and loadmaster as when I was the co-pilot. So I knew them all, and it's kind of interesting. There's certain relationships that go on in a C-130 crew. At least back then, they don't have engineers now and navigators. But the engineer is like the classy position in the enlisted ranks, because they're more technical and they keep the systems going and everything like that. And even though I got along very well with my flight engineer when I was a co-pilot, I mean, we used to do forms together and everything, and as an aircraft commander, you kind of had to establish a new relationship, because kind of the AC he'll set the rhythm and stuff like that, and then the flight engineer would have his own rhythm, because they have certain forms, certain things they got to do, and not that we didn't get along, but I just had to learn a new way of getting along with my flight engineer now as the aircraft commander versus the co-pilot. But by and large, we got along with everybody. It's fine. I tell you, but the first major, the aircraft commander that mentored me the most, he taught me a lot of stuff about flying the airplane. He could fly a C-130 as good as anybody that I've been with, and I learned a lot from him. I know I was a co-pilot, and co-pilots weren't supposed to do what they call short field land, max effort landings. But he said no. He had me as a co-pilot how to land on the numbers all the time, because you always had to be prepared to land on a short field in case. And so I did, and so he developed me and taught me how to fly VFR, because see, today most of everything goes on instruments. You fly airlines, it's all instruments, and you got air traffic control telling you what altitudes to go to and how to get down and when to do the approach, blah blah blah. But when you're flying visual, there's a runway, there's Da Nang, then you got to get down, and usually we're over water or wherever it is. So you got to know how to do that, which is not like a big deal, but it is if you're not used to it,
Sure.
Because it's all up to you. You got to decide when to get down, when to avoid other airplanes, to avoid enemy ground fire, and that kind of stuff. So that's kind of stuff that you learn when you're in country as a co-pilot. So you're prepared when you're an aircraft commander. And I learned a lot from, all the aircraft commanders kind of acted as mentors and instructors to the co-pilots, because they knew at one point they were going to upgrade. But I had one major that was the best one for me. And you kind of learn that's what you develop. But in PACAF, our regulation was about that thick, and because it was a war run, and everybody knew what they had to do. They had to move cargo, they had to get land and take off, and quickly. So you land, you do what you need to do. If there, usually there would be like an aerial port guy and a forklift. As long as you had an aerial port guy and a forklift, he could take all the cargo off the airplane. It was better if you could have a K-loader where you could take them all at once. And if there was nobody there, you just popped them out the back. You went to the end of the runway or the taxiway, and we have a procedure in the C-130. They call it combat offload, and you just kind of like lower the ramp and push the push the pallets out as the airplane's moving, and turn around and go.
Wow.
And we did that if we had to. So everything was quick. And that aircraft command major I was telling you about, he taught me how to run checklists fast. When the pilot was ready to start running the checklist, start engines, that meant everybody had to be ready to start engines, taxi, and take off. Boom. Because that's the way it is in country. And fast forward 25, 30 years later, when I was an operations group commander in the reserve unit in Milwaukee, and I was responsible for all the flying and stuff like that, I would set up exercises so that my crews were able to rapidly do that stuff too, because they didn't know. We didn't have combat for many years. We didn't put C-130s in that kind of a combat environment, which they did get once they went into, when we started going to Afghanistan and stuff like that.
Right. Wow. That's pretty cool. So how long did you stay at CCK?
Till, I guess it was about to November of '74, I think it was, because with international agreements, whatever, they took all the C-130s, our C-130 wing, and they moved us to the Philippines, to Clark. And one of the squadrons, 345th, I believe, went to Kadena. But the majority of the wing went to the Philippines, so that's where I wound up in the Philippines for a couple of years. Because by that time I was married, so that turned into an actual accompanied tour. So when I was at CCK, I was assigned, I was single, so I got credited for a short tour and short overseas tour, and in the Philippines I got credited for a long overseas tour. But I separated after 9 years. Although no, I didn't separate right away. I got a consecutive overseas tour to Germany after the Philippines.
Okay. And so in the Philippines, you were doing a lot of the same.
So in the Philippines, yeah, aircraft commander, flying around, going all different places. Until a job they had in the Philippines, they had been consolidating the command and control. Vietnam was winding down, so they took, there was a couple of the airlift control centers that closed down. So we started it in the Philippines, the airlift control center, and they were recruiting. They needed 5 controllers to operate that, and they were looking for people. And I said, I asked my operations officer if that was a good idea, and he kind of like lit a cigar and he said, well, if you want to fly airplanes for your whole career, or you could, get some. So that was so I became a command post. Well, I wasn't a command post controller. It's like a command post, but you're controlling just the airlift operation, not like a base command post is for like all kinds of emergencies and defense conditions and things like that. We were just running we ran all the airlift then in the Pacific, and so I did that for about a year, which was really interesting because then you get to know the wing commander and the deputy wing commander, and they'll walk in and they want to know where all the airplanes are, and you get to know everything and what's going on in the whole wing, airlift-wise. Crews have problems. They call you, they call you up, and they expect that you're going to fix their problem in an hour. But I had a solution to that. It depends on, if the airplane's broke or this thing or that thing or load. You have different issues. But when it looked like it was going to drag out, I just said, crew go into crew rest, which they love to hear. Don't hang out on the ramp waiting for hours and then get canceled. I would put them into crew rest right away so they'd be available quicker when the problem got solved. And that made them happy because they didn't have to pound the ramp. And so it worked out. So I enjoyed all that. I could contact anybody, anywhere in the Pacific, any crew. Like for instance, to call somebody at one of the islands in Guam, you had to call a Navy ship, and from the Navy ship, they would patch you in to a telephone at the building, and then somebody would go run down to where the crew was, because there was no communications on the ramp.
Oh, jeez.
Where you learn how to do all that kind of stuff.
Wow.
So that's the quick and dirty on that. So that was my time in the Philippines. I got to fly all around the Pacific. That was cool. Got to fly in Vietnam, learn the combat aspect of flying C-130s. And fortunately, I never really got shot at. When we avoided, there was a firefight at the field. We just didn't go there. But I talked to people. My roommate was in a different squadron, and one time he said he took a 57 millimeter shell that didn't explode. It got stuck in the armor plating under his seat.
That's crazy.
And if you did stupid stuff, like one of the crews, they took off out of Da Nang, and instead of going out of Da Nang, you would make a left turn and go feet wet over the water right away. He just kind of like lollygagged over a hill, and somebody shot an SA-7 at him. Fortunately, it didn't explode.
Well, it sounds like you were constantly in harm's way, though. I mean, at any point, it seems like
well, yeah,
could have been.
You were. In the daytime, you'd look down, you fly over Vietnam, it's beautiful. All lush vegetation and everything. Fly over at night, it was nothing but, you could see all the shooting going on. All the red tracers and the white explosions and stuff like that. So that was constantly going on. And actually, the most dangerous mission I flew, I didn't even know how dangerous it was. It was around 1975. We were in Thailand. I was on the alert crew, and they launched me. A U-2 went down at Da Nang. It had engine problems or whatever it was, and so I made an emergency landing at Da Nang. And they were bringing 2 C-130s in. One was from SAC and us, to bring them apart so they could fix the airplane. And I had made that trip so many times. And what the preferable thing would be to go over the water and go over all the way up the coast, and then just quickly, Da Nang was right close to the water. But there were thunderstorms there, couldn't fly that. So the only real path, given the weather, was to fly up the middle of Vietnam, which I had done so many times. But in '75, I didn't know. By that time, the North Vietnamese had all SAMs and everything, all in the air. They knew we were there. They could have shot us down any time if they wanted. Yeah. We had no defenses. But we went, dropped off our load, and left. But other than nothing happened. Oh, and I got a chance to fly to Hanoi about 2 or 3 times, because after the peace was declared, I say peace was declared in '72. We would fly from Saigon. Well, we would RON at Utapao. We'd fly into Saigon. They'd pick up what they called a joint 4-party resolution team or something like that, which were North Vietnamese, South Vietnamese, and Americans, and fly up to Hanoi. They'd go do their discussions or whatever they talked about, and then the crew would go off with the North Vietnamese, who would give us a propaganda tour, take us to a museum, feed us dinner, which then the food was usually pretty good, and there would always be an officer there that couldn't speak English. An older guy, he couldn't speak English. He couldn't speak English like I can't speak English, but and we knew that. But they're listening, trying to see if they can pick up any any talking. And they'd have one bridge, and I forget the name of the bridge, but you could see, because we bombed it, you could see where initially it was kind of like fancy wrought iron or fancy metal, and then you could see where it was broken up and then repaired with just plain wrought iron steel and stuff like that. And everybody wore uniform. There was no civilians walking around. Everybody was wearing a uniform. In Illinois, where we went.
Wow. Man.
But that was a pretty good. That was an interesting stuff.
So, where did you end up coming back to once you finally got back to the States? You said you did a couple years in Germany.
Oh, yeah, then when I went to Rhein-Main, Germany.
Yeah.
And flew, that's when I got into special operations.
Ah.
I was in Combat Talon, MC-130Es. And they have terrain following, and their mission is to support unconventional warfare. So we work with the special forces a lot. We also, and at that point, we did. We called it the Fulton recovery, but the formal name, like surface to air recoveries. That's where you drop a kit to somebody. They put this suit on with a tether and send up a balloon, and you come, and we call them whiskers. This two yokes in front of the airplane. You go pick up the thing, and then you reel. We call it the package. You reel the package in. And they've done a number of live ones. I don't even know that they've done any operationally. It's a rather cumbersome system, but it worked. And we did one. My unit did one. The Army Special Forces Colonel, he wanted to do a live recovery. He wanted to do it himself. And it took a year to get permission from the Air Force and the Army to coordinate that, because they didn't want to take any chances. But he finally got it approved, and we did it. I wasn't on the crew that did it, but my unit actually did the live pickup while I was over there.
Wow.
And that.
Can't imagine how fast from standing there going from nothing to then all of a sudden being.
Yeah, it is.
Away.
It is, from what I understand, an interesting thing. But the tether has some stretch. It's nylon, okay. So it's not like you just get yanked. But still, it's a yank, and then you're just kind of like dangling out there. And the system, we had 2 winches. So the first thing, and we called it a parabomb. It was like a bomb-looking thing with 2 hooks. The yoke would, it had a mechanism that would grab the line, and then the line would come under the airplane, and we'd kind of like hook up the line and bring it in and attach it to the winch, and then release the one in the front, and then we just reel this guy in with the winch. That's the way it worked, but they don't do that anymore. But so anyway, I spent 3 years over in Germany, and we loved it. And then I thought I could get a job with the airlines, so I left active duty. But as it turned out, I didn't get a job with the airlines, because it was about the time we had the control strike, and the economy went bad, and instead of hiring like crazy, the airlines were laying off like crazy.
Is this in the 80s?
This would have been 79, yeah, or 80.
80, okay.
So moved back to Jersey for a while, and I flew with the Delaware Air National Guard. I just commuted down there, and I flew with them, just regular airlift, and that's where I became a command post controller for them. So I learned the command post end of stuff, which is interesting. We have all these exercises, and in cases of serious, they have what they call like rap tables, and the National Command Authority would come down and give you instructions on what to do. I mean, that was when you go like DEFCON 4 or DEFCON 3, you know, really serious stuff going on. And we'd just have exercises because we were never going to have a big war with Russia. But fast forwarding again, when I was the Ops Group commander in Milwaukee, I wasn't the wing commander, but the wing commander on this particular day on 9/11, he was off station doing something, and 9/11 hit, so I was in charge of the base, and stuff started happening, and our command post actually got some instructions going into different DEFCON levels, so I put the wing on, and they also have alert conditions. They call them alert conditions now. They call them something else. Where you actually local base, they have Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, and Delta, depending on the serious threat coming on. And we started putting people, machine guns on roofs, pulling cars away, blocking the entrance. All the things that we all practice for war, we were doing it right there at home. All the stuff when you go on an exercise, you go practice, you know, we're going to deploy someplace and this is the stuff that's going to happen. We did that on 9/11. It was interesting.
Yeah, 9/11 was crazy. Definitely crazy. And were you expecting to be put on flying status at all during 9/11, or were?
When 9/11 hit, of course everything changed to a certain extent, and how can I put it? The reserve and the guard units got tasked to set up. Who was the defense secretary? Was it Cheney at the time? No. Cheney was the vice president. No.
Was it Powell?
No. I can see his face, but I can't remember his name. Anyway, we didn't really know what was going on. So we found out. 9/11. We have no way to defend our country internally. Everything we have is designed to deploy someplace. The only airplanes we have on alert were for, or you might say, to defend our sovereignty. If you get somebody coming in that wasn't supposed to be there, we'll go intercept them, tell them to go somewhere else. You know, nothing to do with being attacked or anything like that. No defense radars were compatible to interface with the air traffic control radars, so the Defense Department could not see interior to the country. That was scary, and like we don't have standing armies in our country, so we had no and we didn't know if we were going to get attacked or what was going on. So what we did was we established 5 locations throughout the country where you had a light infantry unit on duty. Some were Marines, and some were Army units. And you had C-130s, 2 C-130s at each location that were on alert. Just in case something happened, you had military units ready to go to react.
Right.
Whatever, you know. Fortunately, we didn't have to do that. So I set up the one at, this was Little Rock, because they were just done by the Guard and Reserve. And my unit basically did Little Rock. So, for maybe almost a year, we had crews constantly on alert, deploying to to a location to be on alert to react just in case, working with the Army unit. I also spent a month at JFCOM, Joint Forces Command in Norfolk, Virginia, as the Air Mobility Command Liaison. And I told them that was unnecessary. I was kind of like, wasting a full colonel's pay time. And so Mac quit, or AMC quit doing that because they did a lot of things that they didn't know we needed, but that wasn't really necessary. And then I deployed to Afghanistan. No, not Afghanistan, Uzbekistan. They were looking for, all of a sudden, for my whole career in the Air Force Reserve, it was 18 years as an Air Reserve technician. An Air Force Reserve colonel wasn't good for anything except to be an Air Force Reserve colonel. Until 9/11. Now, all of a sudden, we were popping up bases in Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, Pakistan, Iraq, later on, and they needed commanders. Now, the way the Air Force worked was you deploy whatever you need. If you need fuel people, you deploy fuel people, you just pull them out of units and you send them someplace. And you have somebody, the base at Karshi-Khanabad in Uzbekistan was where I went. That was run by Air Force Special Operations Command, because that's where the Special Forces were that were going in country. That's where they operated out of. So, but then what happened, and then all the, like the fields were kind of run by Air Mobility Command with airlift control, operators, because the Air Mobility Command can send a team anywhere to any empty field and set up an airlift operation. Matter of fact, when I was in Milwaukee, I had an airlift control flight under me that did that kind of stuff, so I knew it. But at one point, we were there so long, Air Mobility came in and said, "You can't keep all our people," and they told the CENTCOM, "You got to take charge of your command area." So they started, when they wanted to pull their people out and let Central Command start running their bases. So they were looking for 3 commanders, one, I think 2 to go to Afghanistan, 1 to go to, no, I don't know. They were looking for 3, and 1 was to go to Uzbekistan. So I volunteered because I like to do that kind of stuff. And I wound up going to Uzbekistan, which kind of fit my profile because I had Air Force Special Operations Command experience, and they had combat talons and gunships there, as well as rescue helicopters and an airlift operation that was it was a logistics base, but it was run by the Army. And they didn't, so when I got there, I formed what they call an air expeditionary group. So all these onesies and twosies, or all these separate little detailed, the aerial port and the maintenance people and everything, they became part of an organized group under a commander, instead of just being deployed. So that's how Central Command put some organization to their area of control, and that was even before they wanted to do that, because they were going to invade Iraq, so they needed to get control of stuff. That's probably one of the reasons why Air Mobility Command wanted to have their people available. So that's what I did after 9/11.
Wow. Yeah. So, you were in the reserves for how long?
18 years.
18 years.
9 years on active duty, then I had a 2-year break in service, then I went into the Air National Guard just as a part-timer for 4 years, and then I kind of missed not flying full-time. So I applied to the Air Force Reserve and got stationed at Duke Field, or got an assignment at Duke Field flying C-130A gunships as an Air Reserve technician. And 18 years, because mandatory retirement is at 55, so 55 gave me 18 years.
Wow. There you go. Man, what an awesome career.
12 years in Duke Field in Florida, mm-hmm. and the last 6 years were in Milwaukee.
Wow. And once you finally retired, what did you end up doing from that point?
Then, kind of, at 55, you're not really old enough to retire. So I was wondering what I was going to do when I grew up. So I wound up getting a job with a defense contractor, Maytag, they called it Maytag Aircraft Corporation, out of Colorado Springs. That's where their headquarters is. It's a small little company, but what they do is they pick up different contracts for the Air Force and the Navy to service aircraft, loading and unloading, and they did also refueling, aircraft refueling. So they were looking for a new operations officer, operations manager, or whatever they called it. So I moved to Colorado Springs. But what happened was, up in Kuwait, they had picked up a major contract to run the whole U.S. airfield, the airfield in Kuwait, the military side, that did all the serviced all the airplanes coming in and going, all the military airplanes and civilian contractors going in and out of Kuwait City. Whereas initially they were just providing additional manpower support, then the Air Force wanted to go contract. So they got the contract and they had to run the whole thing. And it turned out to be a bigger operation maybe than they anticipated. So I moved over to Kuwait, and I was there full time in Kuwait City, not as the not running the airlift operation, but just kind of being the overseer, the corporate overseer, and putting out fires and just helping keep things going and helping hiring and just making sure everything. So I spent about 15 months in Kuwait, which as a contractor is much better than as a GI, because you know, you just go around, you wear civilian clothes, had a company car, telephone, and lived in an apartment and came and go, and the Kuwaitis are they treat Americans very well.
Were you able to take your family with you?
No, at that time I was by myself at that point.
Oh, I see.
So that's what I did. But then I got tired. No, not I got tired. Then that was all over. We lost the contract because we got underbid, because that's another issue of contracting.
Yeah.
So I came back to the States, and I didn't want to work for the company anymore for no particular reason. So I wound up buying a Play It Again sports store. I don't know if you're familiar with that franchise.
Yeah.
So I owned that for about 5 years in Colorado Springs.
Okay.
Which was kind of fun. It's kind of funny. After I retired from the Air Force, I said, I'm going to get a job, a simple job that I'll just go to work. When I come home, I just leave it home. And I never wanted to do retail because I never wanted to worry about whether people were going to buy your stuff or not. So what I do, I go get a job as an operations manager for a corporation, for a contractor, and then I go buy a retail store. But that was a challenge. And it started out real good. I bought it in September of 2007. And for the first 3 quarters, the sales were going up, and I was really happy. And then 2008, the economy kind of went shh, and I went, oh. Fortunately, that business model works out real good, even in a bad economy. So I recovered rather quickly and built it back up. And then somebody wanted to buy, a couple of young kids who loved hockey. Hockey was our biggest line in Colorado Springs.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. So they bought it from me, and then in 2012 I got out of that.
Nice. So now, are you part of any veteran organizations?
Yeah, I am a life member of the VFW, American Legion, and Reserve Officers Association. I'm not too active in them anymore. When I was in Milwaukee, though, I was very active with the American Legion. When I went back to Jersey, when I first got out of the Air Force, I thought I should join the VFW, so I did. But then when I was in Milwaukee, I became familiar with the American Legion and found out they do a lot of good stuff. So I joined the American Legion. And at that time, it was worthwhile to pay the extra money and become life members. You know, you pay kind of up front. It becomes more expensive now, but when I did it, it was reasonable, and I did live long enough to make it worthwhile. Mostly today, though, I'm active with the Knights of Columbus in the church, and we do a lot of charitable stuff. But I'm a 4th degree Knight, which is the patriotic degree. So we get involved. Like we go once a month. We bring donuts and fruit and stuff to the local VA clinic in Fulton Beach and that kind of stuff. So I'm not as quite as active with the veterans organizations, which I should be, because like on the holidays like Memorial Day and stuff, somebody should go out and put flags on and stuff, which I haven't been doing.
Yeah. So just a couple more questions here as we wrap up. What kind of characteristics did you learn throughout your military career that helped you outside of your military career?
I would say leadership. Leadership, and when I say leadership, understanding how to lead people. We always made a distinction between leadership and management, and you have to be both. But you know, people, they follow leaders, and you learn camaraderie. The reason why people stay in combat, or they get wounded, get healed up, and want to go back, is more to be with their brethren, in which in this case you have to, you're their fellow and female, you know, members, because a lot more, when I first came in the military, there was hardly any females in the military. Now there are many, but that sense of camaraderie. So you have to understand. You have to also understand what rules you can wink at and what rules you have to follow, because sometimes some people just want to be able to get away with something, or and some stuff isn't important enough to go crazy over. It's the old thing about don't sweat the small stuff. However, enforcing, I found out, the best thing you can do is enforce standards. That's probably one of the things I learned. Standards in training and behavior. And as long as you're consistent, people will follow you and they'll do it. They don't like when you're inconsistent. They don't know whether you're gonna want to enforce this or not enforce that, or be. As long as you're consistent, even if they don't like you, they will follow you and do what they're supposed to, because they respect you. That's probably the most important thing about, I think, military leadership, is winning the respect of people that's under you. And it's also vertical. You have to understand your boss, and you got to give your boss what your boss wants. I'm not saying being a yes person. What I'm saying, find out what's important to your boss. I mean, assuming that your boss knows what he's doing. He's, or she. You have to understand what's important to them, because if you can keep your boss happy with what he needs or she needs, then your boss will give you the flexibility to do what you think you need to do, and then your people will be happier, because you can take care of your people without the micromanagement that somebody who doesn't trust you. And Because if you don't respect your boss, how can you expect your subordinates to respect you? So those are some of the qualities.
It's very good. It's very good. But this is going to be archived and viewable for many generations to come.
Mm-hmm.
What message would you like to leave for them?
It's a great country. It's a great constitution, and because I was raised by people who, not just raised, I went to school with people who've been through World War II, and you know, just because we as humans have human failings, that doesn't make the ideals that our country has set up wrong. Just because we can't live up to them, so you don't kind of be down on the country and the ideals that the flag represents, just because we aren't good enough as people to live them out. And those are the and you know what? Study the Vietnam conflict. The reason I say that is because we are in Afghanistan. This torques my jaw. I'm not like a pacifist, but I think it's ridiculous that we still have military troops in Afghanistan because we didn't learn the lessons of Vietnam, and it's turning into be a very similar situation. It wasn't in the beginning, but learn our history, study it. Don't just pass a test in high school and in college. That's it.
All right. Do you feel like there's anything else that may need to be added to this interview?
No, I probably said everything. Because it's not really about me. It's about the country. And I think I'm just indicative of many military people, and I know Army, Air Force, Navy, and Marines, we like to, poke fun at each other, but there's really a lot of great people in the military, and they should be respected, and I enjoyed working with all of them.
That's awesome. All right. Well, with that, Bob, I thank you very much for sitting down, taking the time to interview with me. That concludes our interview. Thank you for your service, sir.
Okay, my pleasure.